Hairdressers slash barbers, what was your I fricked up moment and how did the customer react? When I was in beauty school, my brother-in-law and husband came in to get haircuts. While I was cutting my BIL's hair, he didn't know what he wanted and kept wanting to go shorter, shorter, shorter. I started out with a 5 guard and ended up down at a 2 by the time he was happy. So, I'm finally about 3 minutes away from being done with the haircut, and I flick the guard off so I can clean up around his ears and hairline. He says, "Hey, absolutely, I think it's longer on this side. Can you even it out?" So, I immediately move to that area and slide my clippers up the side of his head. With no guard on. Just take a huge slice of his hair clear off the side of his head. I am not ashamed to say I cried, because I did. I ended up fixing it pretty well, and when it grew out a bit, it was his favorite haircut ever. Phew. Or at least he told me so. Dumb question maybe, but how do you fix that? There is a line of missing hair. How do you do that? Glue stick, and some staples? Not a hairdresser, but a groomer. I was trimming a dog's tail, and right as I was closing the scissors he wagged rather enthusiastically at someone coming through the door. I ended up snipping about 1mm off the end of his tail and it required stitches. I felt like the worst person in the world. The clients were actually very nice about it and continue to bring him to me. I'm a vet nurse and I always have clients come in from grooming with cuts from scissors or nips from the clippers. Most people are really understanding about it, especially if their dog is hyper and hard to control, but we did have a woman come in tears because the groomer had cut an inch-long gash in her dog's neck, shaved off all his whiskers, and snipped a piece off his ear. They closed down about a month later. Well, I was getting my hair cut once at a salon and the hairdresser snipped off a piece of my ear. It was a very bloody and unpleasant experience. You must have said you wanted the Van Gogh cut. After an experience like that, I'd never go back. Puts on sunglasses. They fall off. Kind of the opposite, but I ducked up as a customer. I had just moved to a new town and needed a haircut. I walked around a little until I saw a rundown looking hole in the wall barber shop, mentally shrugged to myself and headed in. There were 2 middle-aged Italian guys sitting on a bench reading newspapers, and a guy in his early 20s leaning against the wall telling a story. They all look at me with a kind of blank expression, then one of the older guys kind of barks at the younger guy, "Get Tony." The young guy walks to the back and in a minute or so a guy in his 60s also comes out, glances at me and then nods at a chair, and in a super heavy Italian accent says, "You sit." I cut. Okay, so there is an odd vibe here, but I still have that stranger in a strange land feeling you get when you move to a new town, and I'm a bit of a moron. So I sit, and Tony starts cutting. There was no discussion about what kind of haircut I wanted or anything. This old guy just starts snipping away. Occasionally he pushes my head in the direction he wants it to go, but there is no conversation, which is fine by me. I hate small talk with strangers. So during my efficient and silent haircut, there is a small parade of Italian guys that enter the shop, say hi to Tony and then go into the back room, which after the 4th guy I can only assume contains a staircase to the basement or perhaps a TARDIS. Even I am not so idiotic that I haven't caught on yet. Obviously this place holds a totally illegitimate business with nothing shady going on at all. Right. Eventually Tony finishes his chopping, and I'll be damned if it isn't the best haircut I have ever had. So good in fact that I kept going back there for 2 years despite how sketchy the place was. Every single time I went was eerily the same. There were always a couple guys sitting there reading papers. Tony always had to be called from the back for my silent haircut. Well, to be fair, once I had been in a few times he actually smiled and welcomed me back and asked how his job, and there was always a lot of foot traffic to the back room. And I was always the only customer. Not really the same thing, but a friend of mine used to go out, get drunk, meet guys, bring them back to her place, and convince them she knew how to cut hair and she wanted to give them a free haircut. They were always drunk too, and generally said okay. Sad thing is, she does not know how to cut hair, and they would wake up at home the next morning looking like someone tried to cut their hair with a lawnmower. And no, she did not sleep with them either. Just a bad haircut and adios. When they sneezed, the kid didn't care, so I just brushed some hair over it. On the receiving end, I used to go to this place called Dino's Barbershop that everyone in town was convinced was a front for the mob. Everyone who worked there was Italian, wore way expensive jewelry, drove expensive ass Benzes, and they had weekly trips to Atlantic City. Got many of ducked up haircuts while there, but two stand out. Week before 8th grade is over, go in to get a trim. I ask to keep it longer on top and shorter on the sides, but nothing too complicated, simple trim, mainly to thin out my hair. Halfway through, I realize the woman cutting my hair is giving me a textbook bowl cut and I'm pissed. She then tells me, don't worry sweetie, I think this would look really good on you. My own son has the same haircut. She had a picture of her son at her station and his haircut was ducking awful. Ended 8th grade with people calling me bowling for soup. They were popular back then. Guy named Jimmy is cutting my hair, and the topic of shaving comes up since I just started growing facial hair, peach fuzz pretty much. Guy offers a free hot shave even though it's not necessary at all, but I won't turn down anything free. Halfway through I realize he's not paying attention to the straight razor shave, but instead is watching a college football game and ends up cutting my neck. Not bad enough to get stitches, but bleed a lot. Proceeds to apologize by saying, my bad dude, I've got 10 grand riding on this game. I turned a girl's head bright seafoam green. She was a teenager. It was supposed to be platinum blonde. I was alone. Tears were shed. She'd be so on trend if that happened today. Somewhat relevant, when I was 8, my dad paid me $20 to allow him to completely shave my head because I have these 3 huge freckles on my scalp that form a triangle, and apparently he thought it was hilarious. I got $20. My dad got in too deep shit with my mom. Greatest childhood memory. I mean, technically, any 3 freckles form a triangle. I'll go. My hairstylist cut me pretty badly on the neck with a straight edge razor. His response was, we got a bleeder. Followed by, damn, you just never stop bleeding. As if that was my fault somehow. He then rang me up at the register after I bled out for a good 15 minutes, and expected me to pay. I said, you've got to be ducking joking, and walked out. Never went back. The guy didn't even apologize. Edit, to those saying that it's no big deal, and that nicks happen all the time. Normally I'd agree with you, as I have been nicked before and had no problem with it really. But this time, it was kind of over the top. I had a pretty noticeable amount of blood on my shirt, maybe like quarter size, and I had whatever powder they use to clot blood, smeared all over the back of my neck, mixed with blood, that he didn't even bother to remove or inform me about. You can't clot your blood on command. What a ducking casual. I was just trimming away, snip snip, and doing what I thought was a nice job. I was taking off a lot of hair, maybe a little bit too much, but I didn't really think it mattered. Suddenly, I was interrupted when my mother walked into the room to see her 4-year-old daughter with a pair of safety scissors in her hand and a bowl of hair on her lap. The look on her face told me that I had gone and ducked up. When I was a tight-ass student, my friends and I frequented a shitty hairdresser that was about half the price of a decent one. The cuts were average as duck, but it seemed worth it for the savings. I was waiting for my friend to have her hair finished and I was going to go after. Halfway through the haircut, the hairdresser cuts his finger badly and starts bleeding all over her hair. I only realized something went wrong when I heard a massive thud. My friend had fainted at the sight of the blood and slid clean out of the chair onto the floor. The thud was her head hitting the ground. She also acquired a concussion. We started shelling out for decent hairdressers after that. I once had a guard pop off while I was cleaning around the sides of my customer's head, and I ended up shaving a bald spot about 2x4 inches on the back of his head. Luckily the customer was only a child, and his mother was very understanding. I gave her whole family of 5 free haircuts, and they let me play around and do some chemical straightening and dye jobs. After they tipped me $200 and wouldn't let me refuse it, Even after telling them all the work I did would have only cost them around $170. Hell, I'd pay you $200 to give my kids frosted tips. I don't have kids. Not my mistake, but a client came in that had her sister cut her hair into 3 layers. Essentially they made 3 ponytails and chopped the top the shortest, next a little bit longer, and last the longest. It looked so ridiculous, and came out pretty good after I fixed it. Got a good tip on that one because they didn't think it was salvageable. A year or so ago, I had a hairdresser with ridiculously long fake fingernails stab me in the eye with her pinky nail. She acted totally oblivious, even after I said ow, and put my hand to my eye and pulled it back looking for blood. She just kept on cutting and pretending like it didn't happen. No, she didn't get a tip.